This video is about version control. Suppose you're working on a software project by yourself. There's just you're working on a file, it has your code in it, and you make changes and everything's going along fine and you get your project done. Okay, that wasn't too bad. Picture this is a complex project though, where you're working with somebody else. So now there's two of you. Now what if you both want to work on the same file at the same time? You have a little bit of an issue. One person could change it while the other person changes it, but then somehow you have to put both the pieces back together. What if you're on a really big project and there's like lots of people working on it and you don't even really know who's going to change the file? Then how do you coordinate all those changes? This whole topic is version control. It's a really important part of software engineering. It's like a basic piece. And you don't hear too much about it when you're in college, at least I didn't. But then when you go out and you're working on a job, version control becomes really important. So let's talk about version control, and what we're going to do is we're going to look at a specific example of how it's working so you can kind of really get a feel for it. Before we do that, let's talk about it generally though, just a little bit. Suppose that you wanted to come up with a way for doing version control, for controlling a file in your project without having each other clobber one another's changes. So like if person A works on a file, it has it checked, has a copy of it, and person B has a copy of the file, and then A makes a change and B makes a change at the same time, and then A puts their version of the file back, whatever that means, saves it somehow, and then B saves their, they could wipe out A's changes. So that's kind of the basic problem. And there's different strategies for resolving that issue or deciding how to handle it. And we're going to look at some slides in a later video kind of in more detail, but generally speaking, the first way they sort of thought about controlling code was from this really sort of simple idea of you check out a file, you make your changes and you check it in. And maybe when you have the file checked out, then the other person can't check it out. So it's sort of like at a library, if you have the book checked out at the library, somebody else can't check out the book because this other person has it. So that's kind of simple to understand. You can see how that could work. Of course, the problem with that is you might have two developers that really do want to change it at the same time, right? So you don't want to say, well, you can't work on it at all until I'm done with it and check back in. So if you kind of do that, then you have the issue of, okay, well, two people can check out at the same time, but somebody's going to check in first, and whoever checks in first, okay, they kind of won. But then the second person goes to check in. There's going to have to be this merge process where it says, oh, well, the file changed since you checked it out because somebody else flipped in some changes. So kind of analyze the source code and figure out how to merge your changes in without wiping out what the other person did. And that happens all the time. That's called merging. And usually the software or the version control software can figure out how to take the two versions and merge them together, and it can do it without asking you any questions. But that doesn't always happen. So suppose that person A and person B, they both check out the same file, and A makes a change and they check it in, and then B makes a change simultaneous to A. But when B changes the file, they're changing the exact same line of code that A changed, right? Well, the merge software doesn't know what to do because A and B changed the exact same spot of code. If they didn't change the same spot in the code, like say A added some lines in some part of the code that B didn't touch, then the merge is kind of obvious what to do and it won't be an issue. But if A and B change the same lines of code, then the version control software is basically going to ask you, what am I supposed to do? Because I don't know how I'm supposed to merge this. You got to figure it out for me. So we're going to look at some examples because maybe that was all so confusing and theoretical. You don't know what the heck I'm talking about at this point. So we're going to look at some specific examples of checking out code and making changes. And we're going to do it in College World. We're going to use that kind of as our playground. So let's go back to College World. Here we are looking at Fern Valley. This was the college that we created in the introductory versions of it. And if you look at the display here, there's one thing you can do. You can hit about here. If you hit about, you'll see who worked on the project. There's something, seems like there's something a little bit odd with this page, and maybe we'll look at this later, why this is repeated so many times. But you can see it's showing basically for 3 years who worked on it. Let's say that we want to make a change to the code and we want to add in fall 2020. So we will go to College World React. This has a user interface, and we're going to open it up, and we're going to go under Source, and we're going to go under Components, and then we see an About component. And I already had it up, but if we click on it, we can see the code here. And maybe we don't quite understand what this code means yet because we haven't really talked about React, but you know, you can kind of figure it out a little bit. It looks like these are HTML codes here, and it looks like this is a line for 2019. So let's get this window a little bit smaller because we're going to see something kind of cool here. And I'll bring up the code, and we're going to make a coding change. Okay, I have these windows positioned just like I want it, so I'm going to take fall 2019, and I'm going to duplicate that line, and I'm going to change it to 2020. Oh, 2020. And if I do this, notice that in the browser, which is displaying that page, it magically knows that I made a change on the page, and it's redrawn it, and it's shown fall 2020, which I think is just so cool. And that's part of React, but we're not really talking about React in this video too much. So I made a change, and that looks good. It seems decent. Now watch what's happened over in our IDE in IntelliJ. IntelliJ has changed the color of this file to blue. It knows we checked this file out, and it knows we made a change. This is so useful because as you work on the project, you're going to get confused about, well, what did I change? I can't remember. I did a bunch of stuff. Anything in blue is a file that you changed. If I do a right click on this, I can do some really good things with version control. Now our version control is Git. That's the tool that we are using, and there's other version control systems, but they're all ballpark similar. So I can do, for example, I could say, well, what did I change in this file? I mean, we know what we changed, we just did it, but maybe I made a bunch of changes and I went to different files, and in the end, I can't remember how I changed this file. I can do things, I can say, well, compare this file with what's in the repository. And if I do that, it says, oh, well, you added fall 2020. That's what this green line's showing me. So that's great. I can review any change I made. I can decide whether it seems good to go or not. Another thing that I can do, which is really great, if I go under Git, I can say, well, I did change this file, but I don't think I like my changes. They didn't go so well. This happens all the time. Like you'll make changes to the code and you'll just mess it up so badly that you can't even get back to the way it was before. This is a super useful power of version control. You can do this rollback, and then you can go back to the way it was. Let me just hit the rollback here. So it's taken the 2020 out, and the page will be repainted without it. The power that this gives you is this. This gives you the power to make a small change to the code, test it out, save it, check it in. It's in the main repository. The change you made is good, and then you can go and try to make another change. If you kind of implement code in this piece-by-piece fashion, it's kind of a safe way to do it. The other way to do code changes, which is a little bit harder, is to make a lot of changes and then commit them all at once. The thing that's tough about that is sometimes as you work on code, it'll be working really well, and then you'll make one more change, and then somehow you break it, and you don't know how you broke it, and then you have trouble getting back. Well, if you're checking in your progress as you go, It's a much simpler way of doing it. So let's go back and put in our fall 2020 again. And I'm going to do the right click here. I can say commit this file. Let's do it. Let's hit commit file. It's saying, okay, you are about to change this file. What comment do you want on this file? So I'm going to say added the year 2020. This is going to be recorded by Git as what the point of this change was. This comment is important. People looking at your code or looking through changes in the repository will want to know, what was that change? Do I need that change? What happened to this file over time? So do not put in some sort of jokey comment here. Put in a comment that's kind of meaningful. I can also review my changes one more time, and then I can do a commit and push. This is going to push it up into the cloud and commit my changes to GitHub. So in that prior screen, it was asking, it needed my email address. I filled that in. I hit the commit and push button. I think that's what that button said. And now it wants me to actually push the changes. I'm going to hit push. And it has pushed the change. You can see down here it says one file committed. And it's pushing this change up into the cloud, into GitHub, right? And this has turned black. So that is your first introduction to version control. And we're going to talk about version control more in an upcoming video.